Hello, everyone, and welcome. I can't tell you how excited I am today for the first in the series of interviews where we're speaking to people who've radically changed their diets and had major health transformations. And today we're speaking to Rebecca Johnson of Cabana Chronicles. So many of you will know her from her new YouTube channel, Cabana Chronicles. And Rebecca has had a phenomenal success in, I don't know if we call it, we can't say curing, but certainly no longer having multiple sclerosis symptoms after almost a decade since diagnosis. And so we'll be talking about that, Rebecca's life in Spain, her life on a very low carbohydrate carnivore diet, and also I do encourage you to go over to Rebecca's YouTube channel and check her out there at Cabana Chronicles. Now, you're here on Happy Sexy Health, and we're here on a mission to end unnecessary suffering of type 2 diabetes and related chronic diseases. If you're over 40 and you are ready to reverse your type 2 prediabetes or insulin resistance, you are in the right place. With our 21 and 90-day reset, will help you to adapt to primal eating. So let's go now to Rebecca and the first in this series of fellow Brits who are reaping the rewards of this way of eating. So Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks, Stephanie, for inviting me.
I'm so thrilled to invite you. So first of all, tell us a little bit, I know you're in Spain now, but tell us a little bit about where you're from in the UK.
Well, I consider myself to be from Birmingham. That's where my family's from, generations back. And I moved there when I was 18 and I lived there for nearly two decades. But I did grow up in a little village in Somerset. So that's where my earliest memories are. But I consider myself a Brummie without an accent.
Well, I'm probably without an accent as well.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what's the little village in Somerset?
Oh, no one will have heard of it. It's called Moorland, but it's near Bridgewater. You may have heard of Bridgewater. Between Bridgewater and Taunton.
I'm not too far. I'm about an hour from Somerset because I'm in Wales, in South Wales.
Ah,
But
yeah.
okay, let's get into this a bit further. What made you? I don't know if the Brits are a bit more resistant, maybe to new ideas, but I know this has certainly taken off in America a lot more, but it's less heard of here. And so, what was it, Rebecca, that made you think about changing your diet for health?
The actual moment when I decided to go carnivore was actually very spontaneous. I didn't really research it in depth or even too much hope in it that it would change. I had no idea it was going to reverse my MS symptoms. But the first I heard of it was actually a year before I actually took the plunge. And it was just on YouTube. I just came across it on YouTube and I watched an interview with Kelly Hogan. I don't know if you know of
Yeah.
Kelly Hogan. And that really struck a chord in me that I thought, oh, that's an amazing story. But I didn't know whether to believe it, but it just really stood out. I just thought, how strange, how extremely strange, but how absolutely amazing. Look, she looks so healthy. And who am I to reject this information? But what happened then was that YouTube, as it does, suggested more carnivore videos once I picked the one. And every now and again, I would click on them, watch them. And what struck me about them was how healthy everybody looked. Everyone was just glowing, you know, shiny hair, bright eyes, talking about having reversed their health conditions, losing weight, all the things. And at some point, probably subconsciously, something changed. And I thought, why not give this a go? And it was within a month that my body had changed and my brain. So it wasn't the case that I did it hoping to have a radical change. I didn't think that radical change was possible. I thought that I'd healed myself as much as I ever could by changing my environment, moving to Spain, more sunshine, being in nature. And I had helped myself overcome some of my symptoms, but I was still restricted. But when I went to carnivore, it was like, I
Yeah.
just came back, my brain came back, and it was within a month. Absolutely crazy.
It's amazing how quickly it happened. So
Yeah.
just fill people in because I know your story. Was it 2016 that you were diagnosed?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. And
Well, it was 2016 that I had my first, so the nerve failed in my eye,
mm,
all of a sudden, out of nowhere. And I didn't know what that meant. But anyone who is my type B knew that it was either a brain tumor or potentially, and so he was encouraging me to sort it out, to go and get it checked. So I went to hospital, and they had me in for a scan that night, for a brain scan,
mm,
and that negative. And then they kept me for more days with an MRI scan to check for demyelination, which is what happens with MS. You get demyelination. So that is the myelin sheathing around the nerve fibers in the brain. It's a fatty kind of protective casing, a bit like wires have a protective casing. We have that in our central nervous system. And it's made of cholesterol. Go figure.
mm.
And the immune system attacks that when you have MS. And that's what causes nerve failure in different parts of your body. And it could happen in any part of your body. So they found that I had demyelination, but the actual diagnosis wasn't till 8 months later. So it was early 2017. But I knew from this hospital scan that that's what they were going to diagnose me with. It's just that they wanted to wait until the official diagnosis for whatever reason, just to make sure I still had symptoms coming and further demyelination activity before they actually make the official diagnosis. So it was drawn out over a space of about a year.
Yeah. And then, so from 2017 onwards, tell us a little bit about how your life changed. Now you've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. How were you experiencing that?
Well, I mean, it was the hardest time of my life, like no question. It was, in fact, I'm actually writing about it now.
Mm,
I'm revisiting a lot of the details of the time in my writing, and it's painful. Visit. It's tiring to write it. I mean, on a kind of emotional level, and yeah, so quite fresh in my mind at the moment because I was writing about it last night, and it really was from within the context of my usual experience, unreal. Unbelievable. This was not the kind of thing that happened to me. I was in my mid-30s. I was full of energy. I was on my game. I was studying a PhD when my nerve failed in my eye, and I only just managed to hand it in because of the symptoms started to come in my final year. And when I submitted my PhD, I just completely crashed. The submission of my PhD coincided with the official diagnosis. And then the next years, I thought that, oh, I'm crashing because I've just handed in my PhD and now I'm just having a crash. But that crash never ended. I had it for 2 or 3 years, and it was no physical, but cognitive. So I don't know which of the symptoms were the worst. Like the physical symptoms in themselves were debilitating, disabling, the exhaustion, the ache, the nausea, bladder issues, balance issues. Some people with MS have speech issues. I didn't have physical speech issues, but what I did have was my memory was so poor that I couldn't hold a conversation. So it was like conversations, my words were like sand through my fingers. I just would lose my words. I'd lose the thread of the conversation. My memory for vocabulary just disappeared from my head. And I would get so angry trying to find words for like, basic words, refrigerator, what's that thing? It was like, I felt like an old lady. I was using mobility aid. By the time a few years had passed, I was actually using a wheelchair. I was housebound and I had no quality of life, and I was completely isolated as well. And it impacted every single level of my life, from the ability to earn income, to the ability to sustain friendships, to my ability to just feel okay in the world. I just wasn't okay, on so many different levels. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through. And I didn't think that there was any way out of it because everything my neuro rehab team was telling me and medical team was telling me that, oh, you just have to learn to live with this. We'll put you on the medication, but they won't help your symptoms. That they just may help to slow the progression of disease in the future by some degree. But whether they did or not, you won't know because you can't compare your case to anybody else's. And that's it. There's nothing we can do for your symptoms. Learn to live with them.
Oh, that must have been so, like, I think depressing is an understatement. Just to be a young woman, thriving, doing your PhD, full of energy, full of life, with lots of different hopes for the future, to
Yeah.
suddenly debilitating tiredness, physical disabilities, mental issues, just having a simple conversation. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about how it actually felt to be going through, that at the time.
I mean, like I say, it just didn't feel like it could be real.
Yeah.
And I really had to call upon my deepest soul strength to keep going every single day. I look back now and, it's almost unbelievable that I'm looking back on it now that I'm not in that situation anymore. But I'm just so glad that whatever it was that kept me going did keep me going because I didn't feel like I had a future. I didn't feel like there was any point in my life.
And but you did something very interesting, because you decided to move
Yeah.
such a way.
Yeah.
So tell us about that decision then. You've been diagnosed with MS, you're feeling dreadful, you're feeling isolated, and you decided to move.
Yeah. So this is where things started to turn around. So I basically hit rock bottom. I was back in Birmingham actually, doing my PhD in Manchester. I went back to Birmingham and then that was where I became housebound and started using the wheelchair. And I was so depressed and so miserable. And then one day, again on YouTube, I mean, YouTube actually saved my bacon a couple of times. It's been very interesting. I came across something which was, now this is something that many people resist and many people don't want to know, don't want to believe is true. But I came across something a device that will clear up dirty electricity in your house. So it just it's like an electricity filter to improve the quality of your environment in terms of electromagnetic pollution, I guess. And I didn't know anything about it. I was just reading the reviews underneath this little device and people were talking about brain fog and getting better sleep. And I thought, oh, well, that's symptoms of MS. That's the symptoms I have. And and it only cost 30 quid. So I just thought, you know what? I'll buy one of those. So I bought it and I plugged it in. And the minute I plugged it, no, not the minute, the second I plugged it in, I looked up and I could see the lights without it hurting my eyes because I had light sensitivity. I couldn't look at lights. And all of a sudden I could see the lights and I saw the light. And it was quite incredible. I mean, like, this did not cure me. This was not a cure. I want to emphasize that. This was the first moment that I realized that there were other factors in my condition. And this one factor was my environment. And that led me on a journey. That's what put me on the journey towards thinking, hold on, there are things about my condition that I can control. I'm not a victim to this. Something's changed it. And it's been consistent. I realized that I did have an electromagnetic sensitivity because when MS, you become sensitive to everything, heat, stress, and as it turns out, in my case at least, electromagnetic pollution. So I think all of these things were just building up to a point where my body was not being able to and living in the second biggest city in England, surrounded by Wi-Fi towers and routers and phones. And I realized, hold on, this is an element of my condition that is keeping me in the wheelchair. But by eliminating it all in my house, I was able to get out of my wheelchair and dance. So I danced.
Wow.
Right, I have to move up a mountain. That's where the idea of moving up a mountain came from. People may think it's absolutely crazy, but in the situation I was in, to experience just a small upturn in my physical and cognitive capacity, because my brain fog also went away to quite a large extent when I realized this. Also, I realized it has to be Spain, because that same year Brexit was happening. And my PhD is in translation. And I knew that if I was just going to be housebound in Birmingham, I would lose my Spanish, which was my bread and butter. You know, if I was going to stand a chance getting back into the workforce, I couldn't afford to stay in England, isolated, not speaking Spanish. So all these things kind of came together at the same time. Brexit, you know, the Wi-Fi thing. And I just thought, I have to go now. The other thing being vitamin D and being able to live off grid. And, you know, obviously the climate in the UK isn't that great for living off grid if you have solar panels, if, you know, if you're wanting to live cheaply and, you know, you want to be in a warmer, drier climate to be able to grow things, to be able to heat your home in an economic way. All these things just kind of came into my head, came together, and I thought, I've got to go, and I've got to go now, because if I leave now, I can get residency in Spain. If I wait until the Brexit line, I won't be able to. I have to apply for a visa, and there's criteria for that. And I was like, I just don't think I can hold on. I have to go now. So I did. I put my house on the market and I went to northern Spain, because when you have MS, you have a heat sensitivity. That's very common with MS. So I knew I could live in the south. So I looked for places in a mountainous area in northern Spain. And I moved up a mountain, and then I got there, and it was the pandemic 2 weeks later. It's completely mad. The whole thing completely mad, but it has worked. So I did make further improvements in my health by moving up the mountain, by being in this beautiful environment that was sunnier, just much better for my nervous system, being far from the city. Because it's not just Wi-Fi, it's pollution, it's, you know, just the constant frenetic, you know, capitalism and strength of the city, noise pollution, actual pollution. You know, there was many reasons why I felt like I could no longer live in the city. And I'd always been a city person. But yeah, now I was like, I'm craving nature. I have to be in nature. And so I did see some improvement. I was no longer using a wheelchair or a walking cane. I was more or less back to normal. You couldn't feel on the outside that there was anything wrong with me. However, I was still limited. I wasn't actually well enough to start working properly or to go out socializing properly. I still had some fatigue limitation, bodily limitation. But like I say, there were much less. I was in a much better situation. But the second I started carnivore, that's when my strength came, my true core strength came back. And now so I went carnivore maybe just under 2 years ago. And now at this point, I'm fine. I do not feel like I have MS anymore. I can't say that. I can't officially say that. I have this diagnosis. I can't actually get rid of it, actually. But I do not think about MS at all, ever. I'm working again. I'm doing demanding Vinyasa yoga classes. I'm socializing. I'm living independently. I've got my body and my brain back.
Yeah.
So,
And it kind of makes sense once you understand the biology of the myelin sheath in the brain being made up of cholesterol, requiring fat, requiring proteins, requiring ketones. And it sort of makes sense that when you start eating a protein and fat rich diet, that it helps to heal all of those systems in the body. But let's just go back to you're up the mountain, you're now well, or much better. You're much better than you are. I think remembering back from your videos, your energy was still really coming and going at times.
yeah.
But you've now heard about the carnivore, you've seen a YouTube video, you've watched other videos, and you've thought, do you know what, I'm going to try this. But you must have had a thing holding you back, thinking, well, this sounds a bit strange, or I don't know if this is for me. But tell us about your fears or concerns, about starting this very low carbohydrate carnivore diet?
Yeah, I mean, I think really my hesitation was that I wasn't somebody who bought meat. I wasn't vegetarian, but meat was something that if I went to a restaurant, I would eat, or
Mm.
somebody's, that was cooking it. I'd get a sandwich, a chicken sandwich, or a beef burger. But I never bought meat. And that's been my whole life. It's just not something I ever did. I didn't know how to do it. Just didn't think to do it. I think really because it's expensive. And I didn't really know properly how to cook with meat. So I would just eat quite simply, very carbohydrate based. And, just one of my favorite dishes was grated courgettes
Mm.
and, spaghetti with grated courgettes and garlic, in olive
Yeah.
oil. Right. So that's the kind of food I ate. And my first thought was, well, how do I buy meat? What do I do when I go to a
Yeah.
butcher? It ask for. And being in Spain as well, I mean, I didn't know how to ask for in English, let alone Spanish. So I that was actually my main hesitation. In terms of ethics, I am an animal lover, big time, but I actually don't have an ethical problem with eating animals because the way I see it, animals eat us. They would if they had the opportunity. Not all animals, but we don't eat all animals either. It's just the food chain. And I accept that on a basic kind of, harsh, brutal as it is. It's just part of the realm. It's part of this planet. And I don't think that's the same as blood sports or being cruel to an animal. I think there's ways that can be ethical. So that actually wasn't a problem for me. It was mainly not knowing what I was doing. And I suppose I thought, how can I possibly only eat meat? Like, isn't that just going to be super boring? How can I, how I couldn't see that, So those are the things that hold me back, not knowing how to buy meat, what to ask for, and not knowing whether I could deal with the lack of variety in the diet. But I went ahead and did it anyway. Actually, the first time I went to the supermarket and bought meat, I had such little understanding of the diet that I bought a whole load of fruit juices as well that day, thinking it was okay on the diet. And then, like a week later, I was like, "Oh, hold on, no, I just that sugar. The whole point is to eliminate sugar." So I kind of had a week where I didn't really understand what I was doing, but then I just started to learn what to do and where to buy meat and what to ask for. And I kept it simple. I would just ask for and beef, minced beef for a
So
long.
that very first week, you've gone to the supermarket, you bought your fruit juice before you realize that's not really part of it. What meat did you buy? Was it strange eating it? Did you find that first week quite tough after being on such a carb heavy or carb based diet for so many decades before?
I don't recall finding it hard once I'd acquired the meat and worked out what to ask for. And I recall my body having an adjustment period. So I had a bit of a funny tummy for a few days. Nothing major. I didn't struggle with it. And but I did have a feeling of that something missing,
Mhm.
like when you give up cigarettes or something,
Yeah,
which I now think of as sugar withdrawal.
yeah.
Something was missing, but it wasn't something that I really struggled with. I got used to it quite quickly, and I actually went to Morocco within a week or two of starting the diet, and I was already planning to do. And when I got to Morocco, I was quite happy to find that I was able to stick to the diet to a large extent. But obviously, sometimes when you're traveling, you can't avoid, seed oil and things like that. But I was in a hotel where, well, it was a long stay hotel that my partner at the time was staying at. I went to see him in that situation. And the owner of the hotel was very happy to hear about my diet and he was very happy to cook specially for me. So I was eating eggs and really well cooked lamb and things like that in Morocco, also getting a lot of sunshine. So I started to feel fantastic, despite being in a very difficult emotional situation with my then partner.
Yeah.
Physically, I started to really improve.
So that's great to hear because it's so it shouldn't be amazing to us, should it? But it is that what we eat has such a powerful effect on us. And I think when we reduce what we're eating on these carnivore ketovore diet, we really feel the intensity of our body calling for that protein, calling for that fat, and feeling super nourished.
Mm.
And we're just on day 12 of a 21-day reset. And the thing that I love hearing the most from people is they're just not hungry and they used to be hungry all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's when our bodies know that they're getting the nourishment. And before we move on from what you ate, I'd love to know if somebody was saying, well, what did she eat when she first started? When you first started, if there's somebody listening or watching and they're thinking, I don't know how to start. My diet's been predominantly vegetables. I've avoided meat and fat all these years thinking I'm doing the right thing. How would I then go from that? What would I actually eat? So it'd be great if you could tell us, maybe what at the beginning, what you were eating, and then we come to what the sort of things you eat now.
Well, it hasn't changed much. Beginning, once I started into the diet, I figured out what I was doing. It became quite straightforward. I would have, and I still do, bacon and eggs every morning. The eggs, butter.
Mhm.
I still do that every morning. Love it. Bacon and eggs. Love it. And then in the afternoon, beef. So I was in a minced beef rut, a ground beef rut for a while because that was all I knew how to ask for. But it's started to branch out now and ribeyes. Obviously, everyone talks about ribeyes. They are
Right.
this. Ribeyes are amazing because they come with on the bone with the fat. And this is the thing. Like, even at the beginning of the diet, I was cutting the bit of fat off. No, I can't. Like that's so stupid to me now. Like that can fill you up. That's what's precisely what's going to give you energy. So anything that's got fat on it is perfect. And if you can't afford ribeyes, then other cuts which can be cheaper. So one that I've started buying in Spain is called chuleta. I think is in English. I don't know if that's beef chop. I don't know exactly what the translation is, but like there's different cuts of meat. It's worth looking into different cuts of meat. But ribeyes are a good one to start with if you can stretch to some ribeyes. They're really great. And minced beef is all a good economic go-to.
Yeah. And it's so flexible, isn't it? And you can really get a fatty minced beef. And it's actually less expensive, but we want the fat,
That's right.
especially for, well, I suppose for all of us, but for women over 40, your hormones depend upon the fat.
Yeah.
And women especially tend to eat low fat. We tend to have bought more into the low fat lives, basically,
Yeah.
because fat, as we know now, helps you lose fat, helps you burn fat, helps you be your optimum body weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've talked about what you were eating and how you were feeling before. Tell us how you're feeling now, 2 years on. Yeah.
I mean, consistently great physically. I've had my moments where I've been tempted and I've broken the diet. I'm not going to sit here and claim to be the perfect carnivore. I have been tempted and I have strayed from the diet, but always come back to it. I think that's the main thing. It's like yoga when you're meditating, is come back to it. Doesn't matter if you stray, as long as you come back.
Yeah.
And that's what I've experienced. But I've been able to tolerate some degree of falling off the wagon. Although I do experience the impact of that. I will break out in eczema and spots if I do eat any sugar, and my mood will go down if for whatever reason I've had vegetable oils or what it might be. But, for the most part, I have stuck to it. I'm just saying that, I haven't been as strict, well, at least I haven't been as disciplined.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the world we live in. There's so much variety all around. That's the side of it that I find most difficult. The temptation and like at Christmas time, things like that, or when you're out with friends and, that can be quite difficult. But when I'm at home and I've done my own shopping for myself, that this is what I have. And I have been consistently well ever since. Oh, and I really need to mention, I had an MRI scan, my first one since I started the diet. And I had my results not long ago, just a month or so ago. No new disease activity.
That is phenomenal, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to think that, yeah, that what we eat has such a huge impact. And yet you go to the doctor, or when you go to the average doctor in the UK, and I'm sure around Europe and America, they will not tell you that if you go on a meat-based diet, a low carbohydrate, most importantly, but it also needs to be high in meat and fat, that you can heal.
Yeah. Well, they don't even believe that. My neurologist actually has laughed a little bit when I told, even though he's like, I don't understand why you're not more ill. He's called me a fool of nature. And it's just like, I don't get it. I don't understand whatsoever. And I'm like, I'm telling you the decisions that I've made that have had an immediate impact. And this is the diet I'm following. And this is how much better I feel. He was just like, well, what, are you an expert in nutrition now? And then I was looking just a few days ago at my medical notes, and I realized that he's put in my medical notes, she's on a protein diet. I was like, you haven't even listened to me. I've told you this is a high fat diet. I've said to you, myelin sheathing is made of cholesterol. And that's when he said, what are you, a nutrition expert now? And he laughed at me. And he's written in my notes a high protein diet. He hasn't even listened to the basic connection I've made between the diet and multiple sclerosis. He's not listening. He's not listening. He's
No,
not interested.
no. I think, well, it's all part of the bigger, big food, big pharma, that our medical teaching establishment is paid for by the pharmaceutical companies who teach drugs only. They do
Yeah.
not teach lifestyle, which is free.
Yeah.
Let's end on a note of, I know that for many people going on this type of high fat, low carbohydrate diet, what we call primal eating, where it's a meat based diet, very low in carbohydrate, meat and fat based diet, very low in carbohydrates. They see this as too limiting. They can't eat, excuse me, normal, and they want to have food freedom. And so, reflecting on your journey from where you were before and how you were feeling then to where you are now and how you're feeling now, how do you feel about those thoughts of it being limiting, which I'm sure is a thought that you've had, as many of us had looking at this before we started, and then going on to what does food freedom mean to you now?
I mean, nothing in my life has been more limiting than multiple sclerosis. That's the bottom line. When you're in a situation where you've had your mobility taken away and your energy taken away, and then you've got it back, it's small fry. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I can't have a carrot cake. I'd rather be out working and socializing and using my body, walking my dogs, doing yoga. Obviously, I'm going to pick that over sweet treats every single time. That's not, I haven't been tempted to pop on moments, but every single time I do, I realize why it's important to stick to the diet.
Yeah.
And freedom for me also means that, like for me, I know there are people out there who love cooking and they love, cuisine, and I just wasn't one of those people. So actually what I found is that I love the fact that I don't ever have to think about, oh, what am I going to have today? What am I going to make? What ingredients do I need? I always have the same. I might vary it from a ribeye to a different or fish one time, or I might go for chicken sometimes. Like there is variety, and I enjoy the variety I do. But every single day, if you're doing it properly and you're doing the intermittent fasting as well, whenever you sit down in front of that nutritious high fat meal, you're always going to want it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing better than sitting down. I love a ribeye as well. I find it very, very satisfying to eat this way. I really look forward to the meals and know that isn't the same variety as there is on the way of eating that is made 90% of us sick,
Yeah,
metabolic.
definitely. Yeah.
And that's
And your
good.
relationship with food, you don't have sugar craving.
Yes.
That you eat when you're actually hungry, when your stomach actually wants it. And then
Yeah.
you give your body time to digest all that nutrition and produce the energy in the mitochondria.
Yeah.
And when you're actually not just in your head wanting to munch something, but truly now hungry for food, that's what you want. Meat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So finally, Rebecca, if there was somebody watching or listening who has multiple sclerosis
Mm.
and maybe is thinking what you were thinking originally, that can't be right. I don't think it's going to work just to eat meat. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I don't think it's right to tell people what to do whatsoever. I think it's really important for the information to be out there. And I would say, consider just giving it a try. 30 days, you never know. And it's not going to, what's harm is there in trying it for 30 days? I feel like that's probably what I'd advise. Just put aside your preconceptions, give it a try. Here's the information. You're free to take it or leave it, but there's no harm in giving it a try.
Absolutely. I quite agree. It's for us all to see that power for ourselves. I think you don't believe all of the healing that it can do until you actually see it for yourself. And if
Absolutely.
you go to the videos online talking about the carnivore diet, primal eating, ketovore, you'll see all the hundreds and overall thousands of comments underneath of people saying, yes, I did this and I healed
Yeah.
my breathing issue. I healed my fatty liver. I healed my type 2 diabetes, or whether healed is the right word, but I'm no longer experiencing symptoms of
Yeah.
diseases after I changed my diet.
And it's really positive, and really open-minded and brave, I would say, because it's flying in the face of mainstream views, isn't it? So I
It
find
is.
it an inspiring community to be part of and a really positive community to be part of, really supportive.
It is. Speaking about community, there's a wonderful community over at Rebecca's YouTube channel called Cabana Chronicles. So you can go and follow Rebecca there. And also in the UK, it's great to meet up with other carnivores, ketovores, low carb, primal eaters. So we also have a Facebook group, and I'll put the link in the comment. It's Carnivore UK Event Hub, that where we talk about all the in-person events coming up. And so I'll put that there so you can connect with us. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for being with us today. It's been so amazing to hear your story again.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephanie.
And thanks to you for watching and listening. And if this is something that you think can help your health, do take the next step and give it a try. And of course, you can always DM us at happysexyhealth if you're interested in joining us on one of our resets. Okay, thanks for watching and listening. Bye for now. We will see you again next week.